I can't do an Aussie accent, but if I could, this is why I would do one. I love the nightlife. I love to boogie on the disco round. See, I can't do one. It started with Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, the film. Then it got turned into Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, the stage show. And now we have a brand new version of Priscilla, the party version. Inspired a lot by Mamma Mia the Party, but more so Guys and Dolls at the Bridge. Priscilla the Party is trying to be an immersive version of Priscilla, taking you straight into the nightclubs that the drag queens perform in, and being a very bold, all-singing, all-dancing version of Priscilla, while still telling the original story that has captivated queer audiences for years. This is a very bold revival, and if you know me, I always love to give credit to something that's trying to be a little bit different, trying something new with a show, and this very much is trying to do something very different, so much so that it's changed the name of the show. So, what areas of Priscilla the Party worked for me? What didn't click so much? Let's find out. But if you haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Ellie, I talk about theatre. I am the most chaotic theatre person on the internet. I do reviews, I do discussions, I do video essays, and if any of that sounds interesting to you, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me out, helps the channel. But let's dive in to Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, but not quite, because she's a party now. So, as previously mentioned, Priscilla the Party follows the basic plotline of Priscilla pretty much to a T. It's the same story that we know and love, with all of its very outdated elements. Oh my god, there are some elements that feel very outdated. Now, this production very openly compares itself to Guys and Dolls, as host Gay Cliche very gladly describes. So, I am going to compare this a little bit to Guys and Dolls, because I feel like there are some elements of Priscilla the Party that don't really work, that feel very borrowed from Guys and Dolls. Because I think Priscilla the Party's main problem is that its format kind of holds it back a little bit. It's trying to have its cake and eat it too in a little bit of a way. But because of the difference here between the way that they make this immersive to the way that they make Guys and Dolls immersive, a little something is lost. This idea is smart. I'm going to give it that credit first. I like the idea, but I think the idea works a lot better said than done. Because putting Priscilla into a nightclub works thematically. It's a good idea thematically. I mean, where are all these drag queens performing? In nightclubs. So blending the actual nightclub experience with the story of Priscilla makes a lot of sense. But there's one thing that was kind of forgotten, and that's the fact that the vibe of a stage show and the vibe of a club are very, very different. Clubs are loud, they're booming, you have the bar at the back that you can easily get access to, and it's one number after another. And because of that, people feel a lot more open to talk to friends, because it's this big, bold music that's being played non-stop. And definitely when I went to see it on press night, there was a lot of talking in that audience, which is fine when you're doing the big flashy numbers, but when it's trying to also tell the story of Priscilla at the same time, it doesn't really work. And it ends up feeling a little bit messy, where you're really struggling to engage with the story that's happening on stage versus a lot of the audience who are still talking very openly. So much so that I worry that people who don't really know Priscilla that well, going to this version and seeing this version for the first time, are not really going to engage with the story as much as they would have done with the original stage show. And continuing to compare it with Guys and Dolls, whereas Guys and Dolls really manages to make that movement slick when they're ushering you around on that floor, it feels very purposeful. It's so well done. You know exactly who's moving you, so that the experience kind of flows still. And while Guys and Dolls is in that immersive staging, it is still first and foremost a musical. Just because the staging is slightly different, the format isn't really. Priscilla the Party's problems stem from the fact that 1, nightclubs have very different rules to theatre, and the blending of the two doesn't really work. 2, the stage at Guys and Dolls is extremely high, so no matter where you're standing, you can still see everything on stage, whereas I don't think this was the case for Priscilla. There were so many moments where, as someone who's only like 5'6", I was really struggling to see anything on that stage. The staging wasn't high enough to negate this. So if you have anyone taller than you in front of you, you just have a blocked view, and you can't really do much about this because it's not as easy as Guys and Dolls to weave through that audience. It's a lot more of a packed space, and you can't really go and stand towards the back. So much so that I ended up just at the first interval going as close to that stage as possible. And 3, whereas the crew and the people who are moving you around in Guys and Dolls are very, very distinct. They have police uniforms on, they are like so clearly the crew. This was not the case with Priscilla the Party. They're wearing Priscilla merch. They have like the cowboy hats, they've got the t-shirts of Priscilla the Party. They are kind of distinct, but the problem is that they're also selling the merch that they're wearing at Priscilla. So they end up blending into the crowd a lot more than the crew at Guys and Dolls. So it doesn't as quickly register in your mind that these are the crew as much as it did when Guys and Dolls had these people. And again, I found that when these crew members were pushing through, when they were standing in front of you, they were also ending up blocking the show. The format here wasn't as neatly done as Guys and Dolls. And to be fair, Guys and Dolls has been on for longer. It's had a lot more time to iron out the issues and, you know, it's had the breathing room to sort out any problems. This is a lot newer, and this is stuff that they could very easily fix, and this is stuff that they can very easily adjust and get a lot better at. And especially being at the performance that I was at, press night, when it was extremely busy, that was probably the first time that they were actually dealing with an audience of that size. But I think you can only judge a show on your personal experience. And the night that I was there, it had a lot of these issues that were improved when I had walked to a much closer area to the stage. But still, the joy of shows like this is being able to just fully let go and immerse yourself into the format. And I kind of felt like the format was fighting my enjoyment. So much so that I would probably say that if I went again to Priscilla, I don't want to stand. I don't want to be on that dance floor. I want to sit down. And I think that's a shame because it should be the really immersive elements that bring me the most joy. Especially because I feel like with shows like this, that's the experience they want you to have. I think where Priscilla the Party works best is in the actual numbers. When they're doing the classic songs, when they're doing Go West, I love the nightlife, these big flashy numbers that are loud and everyone knows them and you're dancing along and you're singing along. But it kind of begs the question of why they didn't just go with that. Pull out the old Priscilla costumes and just do a nightclub version of Priscilla. Because it's trying to do both, but it doesn't really work because of that. And I think it would have been more slick if it just chose one or the other. If it chose to lose the plot of Priscilla and just do the songs, or lose a lot of the nightclub theming. But because of that, you're allowing the plot to actually be seen. At the moment, at the performance that I saw, Priscilla the Party feels a little bit messy. It's not bad. It's fun, but there were a lot of teething problems that really hindered my enjoyment of this format. The movement felt distracting. There's so many points where my view was completely blocked. The crew weren't as distinct as they needed to be. And when my view was blocked, I couldn't move out of the crowd or go to the back to get a different view of it. And I think because of that, it leads to a very mixed experience on that dance floor. An experience that I'm sadly not rushing to do again. And for a show that's very long, there's a whole like pre-show element before Gay Cliche comes out and actually introduces the show. There's 2 intervals, mainly to kind of usher you to the bar to buy more drinks, which again is the kind of nightclub approaching and kind of taking over the format of musical theatre. So on the whole, I'm a little bit mixed. Priscilla, the actual show, I'm a fan of. Of course, as I've said, it was harder in places to really engage with it because of the audience and because of the style of a nightclub being very different to what you would normally expect with a theatre show. So there were bits and pieces that I did end up losing a little bit. But I think the general story of Priscilla is maintained through this show, with the help of host Gay Cliche adding some narration. I think there are elements of Priscilla that have aged less well than others. There's quite a few bits of stereotyping, but I think the more you kind of look at it and look at some of the elements as a period piece, it kind of works better. And I think a lot of the actual queer story really works. There's some really lovely moments in here when the bus gets graffitied with slurs and the 3 queer people have to just group together and get through it. It is really nice to see their relationships build as they slowly come to trust each other a lot more and gain a lot more respect for each other. I think that's the element of Priscilla that still maintains the heart. And there's a lot of heart here. But Priscilla's strongest selling point, especially in this version, is the music. This show has some of the greatest music and the greatest hits of all time. And they're really well done. You have Go West, which is this big flashy number that is just so joyous. You have Born This Way, which has been added specifically for this version of the show, which really highlights that moment where the bus is graffitied and acts as a lovely moment for the 3 drag queens to come together. You have some of the weirder, more off-kilter moments like MacArthur Park that kind of comes out of nowhere but is such a treat. And with all that cake on stage, literally. Better the Devil You Know, I love the nightlife. There's so much brilliant music in here, and I think that's where the show is at its strongest. On the whole, I think the choreo is generally good, but I think this is where we get to the problem of this space being a little bit too small for Priscilla. Because a lot of this choreography is hindered by the fact that this stage is very small. They have different set pieces that come out and extend the stage, but it still feels very limited for space in this much smaller nightclub space than they would have on a West End or even a touring stage. And because of that, I feel like the choreography kind of struggles to hit the heights that it could. A lot of it ends up having, by necessity, to be a lot of walking down long catwalk platforms. But on the whole, I think the music and the choreography of this show is an overall positive, and one of the elements of Priscilla the Party that I found myself attaching to the most. Then we can talk a little bit about the design of the show. Priscilla has some of the most iconic costumes and design work ever, and I feel like about 80% of that is captured in this version. By necessity of the format change of this show, this version relies very heavily on projection. It's hard to fault it for this, because you kind of understand why it has to, but still, busless Priscilla kind of feels a little bit wrong. I feel like the projection is nice, it works, it allows us to flow between the different locations and keeps us going back to the Cockatoo Club fairly easily. But I feel like it does lack a little bit of a spectacle that I feel like Priscilla has always had. Where it manages to get that though is through a lot of the costuming, which are the classics that we know and love, which have clearly been put into a storage container somewhere and they've been yanked back out. Nonetheless, they still look great. There's a really nice blend between the costumes that they've clearly made themselves, the things and the kind of scrappy drag queen costumes that they've put together really quickly out of what they've got, and the bigger, flashier costumes, the wow factor that you can kind of get, which creates a nice balance within the show and the costuming in the show. I think some of the most impressive costumes are the finale gowns that they come out in, which are absolutely beautiful and all come together to form a certain Australian landmark, which I'm not going to give away. There's the costumes during MacArthur Park, which are all these like green cakes, which are so high camp. It's amazing. There's Bernadette's blue dress, which is just gorgeous. And Dakota Star looks gorgeous in it. And of course, some of my favorite costumes are actually the diva gowns. With the really iconic red wigs and the silver dresses, Davina De Campo would be loving this. Something I will criticize in general is that this show relies a lot on makeup masks. These masks that go over the eyes of the performer so that they don't have to keep getting in and out of drag. I feel like something like that works a lot more in a full version of Priscilla, when you're a little bit further back, when you're in the dress circle and you're not up and close onto these performers. The thing is, Priscilla the Party is very intimate. You are up close and personal in a lot of the moments to these queens, and it becomes very obvious that they're wearing a mask from the second they step on stage. It's only really Gay Cliche who manages to keep her makeup on the whole time, because everyone else is having to very quickly get in and out of drag. I just think it's a bit of a shame that you can very, very clearly tell in this more intimate setting that they're wearing the masks. Finally, let's talk about this cast. Fantastic. Praise all around. I adore this cast. Owain Williams as Tick and Mitzi is the real heart of the show. I think he has a real care in the performance for not only his drag family, but also his actual family. There's such a lovely moment in the show where towards the end he meets someone. And I know this show has been around for a while, but I'm not going to spoil who he meets. But it's such a heartwarming little moment that Owain Williams sells perfectly. Dakota Star as Bernadette, first of all, we love the fact that they have finally cast trans people in the trans role in this show. They have had a real history in versions of Priscilla of not casting the trans role authentically, and I'm so glad that this production has done it. And because of that, we get a really authentic version of Bernadette. And Dakota Star really captures the sarky energy of Bernadette, that deadpan delivery, and that feeling of an elder queer person really looking out for her fellow queer people. Dakota really brings you along for Bernadette's journey. The way that she slowly starts to befriend these fellow drag queens and even finds love for herself. It's a great performance, really layered, really varied, and perfectly capturing the energy of Bernadette. I think out of our three leads, though, it's Reese Kerridge who impressed me the most. I feel like out of this entire cast, he is the highlight. I think you can really tell Kerridge's passion for this show through the portrayal of Adam and Felicia. He perfectly captures Felicia's energy and that naivety that she has, being the youngest of the group. The love for Kylie, the lip syncing, the performance is phenomenal. And it's phenomenal in all of these different elements that make this character. We have host Trevor Ashley playing Gay Cliche. As a general narrator to the show, she has such a welcoming and warming presence that it's really easy to fall in love with her. I think as a host, that is probably the most important quality to have, and Ashley has it in droves. I don't think every single joke she tells lands. Some of them are very, very borderline. There was a lot of, ooh, going on to some of these jokes, but Ashley trucks along, having that perfect enthusiasm and likability to be able to carry a show like this. And there's a lot of really great supporting performances, namely from Stephen Serlin, who plays the lovable Bob, and our incredible divas Gracie Lai, Sarah Louise, and Grace Galloway. And finally, for supporting characters, there's Lucy Park, who plays Cynthia, a role that feels, to a modern age, a little bit more stereotypical now. But in her short scene, she makes a strong impact, doing a variety act which ends up being very impressive. I think there's a lot to like about Priscilla the Party, and I think like a lot of that is just the fact that it's Priscilla. Priscilla has had such longevity because of its heart, because of its amazing music. And I feel like this cast are a tribute to that. Does this format necessarily work as well for me? No. I feel like there's a lot of teething problems that they've still got to iron out. But on the whole, I feel like if you like Priscilla, you're most likely going to enjoy Priscilla the Party. But what do you think? Have you seen Priscilla the Party? What are your thoughts? Let me know all of them in the comments down below. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me out, helps out the channel. Here's some links to some other videos on screen right now, and a link to my Instagram. I want to drop me a follow over there. But that's it for me today, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.